Okay, let's just dive right into this. Do you ever get that sinking feeling like you're just falling behind everyone else? It's a heavy question, right? You look around, maybe scroll through your feed, and bam. Everyone you know is hitting these massive life milestones, getting promoted, getting engaged, launching businesses, buying houses, the whole shebang. And then you look at your own life. You might feel this creeping anxiety because, well, you feel stuck in that messy phase of just finding yourself. Listen, it is incredibly common to feel this way, to feel like there's a loud clock ticking in the background while you're literally still trying to tie your shoes at the starting line. It's a vibe summed up perfectly by this one thought. I'm still finding myself while everyone else is succeeding. And it makes sense, doesn't it? We live in a world that heavily rewards and honestly loudly broadcasts early achievement. It's so easy to feel like you completely miss the boat. But wait, think about people like Vera Wang. She didn't even design her first dress until she was 40. Or Stan Lee, creating his first smash hit comic at 39. What if I told you the story you've been telling yourself is entirely backwards? In this explainer, we are going to completely decode the clinical psychology behind the late bloomer. We'll look at the actual science of why you aren't falling behind at all, and why, for sure, your time is absolutely coming. Welcome to our explainer on the psychology of the late bloomer. The core premise we're exploring today is a massive paradigm shift. Psychology actually tells us that blooming late is not a failure of timing. You aren't slow, and you definitely aren't lazy. Instead, getting there later in life is often a huge indicator of complex, deep internal development. You're basically building a massive, rock-solid psychological foundation that most people just never take the time to construct. Part 1. The hidden incubation phase. See, a lot of late bloomers spend years in what society calls stagnation, but actually, psychology has a much better term for this: the incubation effect. Think of it kind of like a caterpillar in a chrysalis. It's this absolutely vital state where your best ideas and your raw, unfiltered potential can only really surface after you've deliberately unplugged from constant consumption and all that chaotic social noise. Stepping back from social pressure isn't you giving up. Actually, scratch that. It's exactly the opposite. It's a necessary, highly productive phase for deep thinkers. You're retreating so you can build. And this brings up a really fascinating contrast. On one side, you have the digital illusion. Everyone out there furiously performing their success for a quick hit of superficial validation online. But you're engaged in deep creation. You're actively trading that exhausting, constant visibility for long-term depth. You're shifting from just passively absorbing the world to gathering the heavy-duty internal tools you need to eventually shape it. You're mastering a phase of deep creation that all those performers are just completely skipping right over. Moving on to part 2, the burden of complexity. Let's talk about cognitive complexity. Late bloomers often have a seriously hard time just starting things because their minds operate on such a high level of cognitive complexity. This is a state where your brain naturally, almost involuntarily really, examines every single angle, every consequence, and every possibility before you pick a path. To an outsider, sure, this looks like pure indecision. It looks like procrastination. But what's actually happening inside that overactive mind of yours is a rigorous, high-level process of gathering crucial info. Info that the average person just completely glosses over. Now, yes, having high cognitive complexity definitely delays action, no doubt about it. But look at the difference in the actual results. The people jumping the gun early, they're usually acting on blind impulse. But when you finally make your move, your decisions aren't just wild guesses. They are profoundly rooted in deep-seated logic and wisdom. You struggle with simple social timelines because, well, your brain completely refuses to do anything simply. You're playing a much longer, far more calculated game. Part 3. Recovering from parentification. For a lot of you watching this, your delayed timeline is actually deeply connected to the trauma of having to grow up way, way too fast. Let's define this clearly. Parentification happens when you're expected to manage the complex emotions or even the literal adult responsibilities of the family members around you long before you were developmentally ready for that weight. If this sounds like your childhood, you probably learned a really harsh lesson early on. Your needs and your dreams just had to come last. You had to shrink yourself to keep the peace and just survive your environment. Let's map out how this actually plays out across your lifespan. Step 1 was your childhood, survival independence. You basically handled everything alone, pure survival mode. Then comes step 2, usually in adulthood, where your nervous system finally starts finding a state of actual safety. And that naturally leads to step 3, which might be exactly where you are right now, the phase where you are finally allowed to rest, Listen, what looks to the outside world like a delay in your life is literally just your exhausted nervous system powering down from decades of being on high alert. Only after you rest can you hit step 4, pursuing your true identity. You see, you aren't lazy, you are healing. Part 4, internal standards of success. Here's a huge strength. As a late bloomer, you probably have a very high internal locus of evaluation. In plain English, this just means you judge your success, your worth, and your progress by your own constantly evolving standards. You don't need society to pat you on the back, you aren't scrambling to meet arbitrary societal deadlines, and you definitely aren't basing your life choices on the quick dopamine hits of likes, followers, or applause from strangers. You're practically immune to traditional deadlines because your yardstick for success is entirely your own. Society is totally obsessed with variable reward reinforcement. Everyone is chasing these fleeting trends to get that quick rush of being seen early. But you're developing self-concept clarity. Because you take your time, you eventually figure out exactly who you are and what you deeply care about. Your worth isn't up for debate, and it doesn't shift with the wind. Because of that incredible clarity, when your success does arrive, it's going to be infinitely more stable and wonderfully authentic. Which brings us to part 5, selective organization of genius. Did you know high IQ minds practice something called selective organization? They purposely save their precious cognitive bandwidth for their deep obsessions and complex ideas, rather than wasting it trying to check off surface-level milestones just to look good for others. So, hey, if your physical desk currently looks like a localized tornado just touched down, or your life timeline seems chaotic to an outsider, it doesn't mean you're failing. It actually means your internal operating system is perfectly structured and hyper-focused on your massive internal goals. You're organizing your genius where it actually matters most, not just where people can see it. Part 6. Breaking the addiction to potential. Okay, let's get real for a second. The one trap that actually might be holding you back is the addiction to potential. Because your brain handles complexity so well, just talking, planning, or even deeply thinking about your big dreams feels amazing. Your brain releases these highly satisfying dopamine hits just from visualizing it all. Dreaming is such a safe, cozy trap because it mimics the feeling of progress, but with zero friction. But as a late bloomer, you eventually have to face the music. Potential isn't reality. At some point, you gotta step out of the safety of your own mind. So how do we break out of that trap? 4 clear steps. 1, recognize that you're addicted to the safety of potential. Just call it what it is. 2, accept that real progress involves repetitive, sometimes boring, and highly uncomfortable physical effort. 3, align your daily identity with those goals. Tell yourself you are no longer just a dreamer, you are a builder. And 4, act. And you know what the best part about step 4 is? Once you finally pull the trigger and move past that fear of failure, you become completely unstoppable. Why? Because your actions are now backed by years, maybe even decades of rigorous, obsessive mental prep. You're locked and loaded. Part 7. Your time is now. Listen to me clearly. Your time is not running out. It's arriving exactly when you are finally strong enough to handle the immense weight of your dreams. Psychology does not call you behind. Your nervous system adapted to immense pressure early on. You learned massive responsibility way before you ever experienced safety, right? You had to learn strength long before you were allowed any softness. You didn't miss the boat. You just spent your time building an unsinkable ship. And you are finally ready to launch. Which leaves us with one final, absolutely massive question. Now that you know you aren't actually falling behind, what on earth are you going to build with that incredible foundation you've so carefully created? The incubation period is over, my friend. It is time to create. If you found this explainer eye-opening and you want to keep exploring these deep dives into the hidden psychology of why your brain works the way it does, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now. Seriously, our next explainer might just decode a hidden piece of your life you've never even noticed before. Until next time, keep building.